friends, and welcome back to another Majora's Mask project making video. We are now up to our 21st mask, and that is super exciting because that means there is only 10 masks left after this in the whole project, which is amazing. I didn't think I'd get this far. And also the fact that I can now literally look around and just see I've got more than 20 masks just lying around the house, which is insane. I'm really proud of my progress throughout this whole thing, and I want to say thank you as well for the support. I really appreciate you guys constantly coming in, constantly watching the videos, constantly watching all the short form videos and reacting to all the photos and things that I post. I cannot thank you guys enough. All the engagement is just reaching more and more Zelda fans, and it's been exciting. This journey has even made me more friends, which is really cool. Some people within Sydney and surrounding cities that I didn't know existed until I started this project. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I just wanted to say thank you. Before I get to which mask we will be making, I do want to apologize and give you guys a little bit of information. I skipped a week. I took a week off, and that was because I was feeling quite run down. I had been making one mask a week for at least 20 weeks, or basically 20 masks over the span of 20 weeks. And it just got exhausting. I had some life things on. We had our anniversary and Valentine's Day and stuff come up all in the same week. And I just thought with my burnout, I just needed a little bit of time off. So I just delayed the 21st mask for 1 week. So this mask will be one of the most requested ones, alongside the Great Fairy mask, which we made 2 weeks ago because it's been a couple weeks since then now. I am excited to announce that thanks to your many comments, the 21st mask is the all-night mask. Now, the all-night mask is another exciting mask. I mean, I think they're all kind of exciting, but I feel like it's a fan favorite considering it was one of the most requested. It is a mask that we acquire in the game so we can stay awake all night and listen to long dreary stories, and we don't have any reason to fall asleep because the mask is keeping us awake. This is used when we listen to Granny's stories in Clocktown, and it is a kind of scary mask. It's actually known in Zelda lore to be used as an ancient torture device. The eyes that you see on the mask are actually supposed to be Link's eyes being grabbed by the mask and held awake, which is kind of terrifying, but Majora's Mask is one of those creepy Zelda games. Now, there's not much else I want to say. I don't want to yap on for too much longer, but yeah, thank you guys again, and without further ado, I will get into the mask making. To start off, I grabbed the mask base, but unlike the other masks, instead of automatically adding to the mask base, we needed to take away. I grabbed a graphite pencil and I started to sketch where I wanted to cut holes into the mask. The detailing of the all-night mask is quite intricate, so I wanted to make sure the gaps were close enough to make it look as close to the pattern of the game as possible, but still have a lot of sturdiness in the leftover pieces of the mask. If the gaps remaining were too thin, they would definitely break, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. Once I was about halfway through my sketching, I grabbed some masking tape and I covered up the eyes. The all-night mask actually has Link's eyes protruding from it, but I didn't want to do that with my own eyeballs, so we would need to make some fake ones, and that meant we needed a bottom layer to build foam clay up on. I then completely sketched the rest of the pattern, and then when I was happy with it, I grabbed my Stanley knife and I started to cut it out. The hardest part of finding the pattern was there aren't many good photos of the all-night mask, so I actually had to go and watch playthroughs of Majora's Mask and people retrieving the mask in-game to try and get like a 360 view of the mask. Models resource also didn't really help. They were good for every other mask except this one, unfortunately. I made sure that my Stanley knife had a fresh new blade so it was as sharp as it could be because I didn't want to make any mistakes while cutting out the bits and pieces. I also used some scissors just for the outer layer, including like the forehead and the side of the mask, even drawing on the eyes and cutting out the pupils because I did want to be able to see through this one. I also did notice that no designs online, no pictures online had any clear view of the bottom of the mask underneath the chin, so I did have to kind of take a guess at that one. Once all the pieces were cut out and I put as many holes as possible into the mask, it was time to cover it. I wanted the mask to be quite sturdy and I do love using foam clay, so the best bet was to cover the whole thing in foam clay. I tried to make the foam clay as thin as possible and go through all of the ridges, but there were some parts that I couldn't really fight, so I did just end up using the foam clay to cover up some holes. I knew I would come back and cut them out later. I then made sure to wet the mask and left it overnight to dry. The next day it was time to start working on the ears, so I found one of my prop elf ears, used that to outline some ear shapes onto some 2mm foam and cut them out with my Stanley knife. Once I was happy with the size and the shape, I then quickly did a search, pulled up some more reference photos and started to use a pencil to mark all of the ear markings onto the foam. I did that to both of the ears, and once I was happy, I grabbed the Stanley knife again and started to cut them out. From here, I realized I needed to figure out how to actually attach the ears to the mask. After looking at some of the mask photos again, I realized my initial mask design was missing a piece, so I had to cut out some foam bridges. I say bridges, they're more like little bits of foam that just got glued in between the mask and the ears. Eyeballing what I needed from the pattern, they kind of ended up looking like a capital P, and then I hot glued those to the mask base and then hot glued the ears to those. Obviously one side looked like a P and the other one was the P but flipped. I actually didn't get a close-up video of those shapes, but this is me just gluing them on. I also didn't mind if there was overlap between the foam and the mask because I was going to cover the ears in foam clay as well to make it all cohesive. I was also quite worried at this part because the foam was kind of flimsy in comparison to the cardboard base. So I needed to figure out a way to have it attached to the mask but also hold its shape. And this is what it looks like with the ears just attached with hot glue. As I said, it was now time to start adding the foam clay to the ears. I basically followed what I did with the mask base, adding the smallest pieces that I could get to the little ridges of the ears. I also used a pencil to poke the holes in and just try and make it as close to the design as possible, but any teeny tiny holes I just covered and knew I would come back to later. This is what it looked like with everything covered in the foam clay. I then made sure to wash it or rinse it with water and then left it overnight to dry. The next day, I wanted to go through and tidy up all the holes of the mask. For any circular holes, and there are quite a few at the top and the bottom of the mask, I just used my hot glue gun. I made sure there was no glue in the gun, heated it up so it was just warm with the metal point, and poked it through the circular holes. As for the more triangular and rectangular shapes, I grabbed my soldering iron with a flat tip and I started to just heat it up and follow the pattern that I initially cut out. Thankfully, even the parts that were covered with foam clay on the front could be seen from the back, so I just went off that. Also make sure to use the soldering iron in a well-ventilated area. I didn't do that and that was a mistake. Once I was happy with the soldering job, I then left a coat of paint on the front, left it overnight to dry, and then came back the next day to paint the rest. I didn't film the whole painting process as I believe it can be quite boring in every single video, but I painted the eyes white first, then the rest of the mask black. I was also worried seeing through the holes from the front, you could see the white back of the mask, so I covered the back of the mask black as well, and made sure there were no little bits of white poking through at all. This mask also has some pupils, so I dipped a very thin paintbrush into some black paint and I shoved it through the eye holes, making sure to circle the paintbrush so it covered all the walls in the eye holes. Then I just kind of cleaned it up around the rim at the front. Once I was happy with the black, I went through and started to color the red of the eyes. Thankfully, there wasn't too many color changes with this mask, and I only needed a couple of coats of each, so pretty soon the painting of the mask was completely done. I then once again left that overnight to dry.
The next day, I had quite a few things that I wanted to do, including threading the elastic back through the original holes of the mask, which I had to repuncture, and adding some wire to the mask. I cut out about 6 pieces of wire, 2 long ones which I shaped and kind of bent to fit the pattern of the ears, hot gluing them onto the back so the ears would be a little bit more sturdy when I wore the mask, and I made sure to do that for both sides. Then for the smaller bits of wire, I actually folded them in half and then bent them at the curve so they would become little hooks. I did have the idea of hot gluing these to the back of the ears on the mask, so similar to ear cuffs, they could sit on the back of my ears. However, only 2 of the hooks really came together, and then when I put on the mask later, they didn't really hook, so they're just on the mask now. They may be used to help hang it up for decoration later. The next thing that I wanted to do was cut out some of the black mesh and hot glue it to the inside of the eyes. You know, the usual, cut out some rectangles, glue it around the eye, fold it over for a double layer, and make sure it's all hot glued down and stuck before trimming the excess off. This is so that the eyes are dark enough that you can't see my eyes from the front, but I can still see through it when I wear the mask. And now there's only one more thing left to do. I did try it on to make sure that it fit and everything was working okay, but the last detail that I needed to add was just some makeup and shading around the outside of the eyes. I just grabbed my eyeshadow palette and a thin brush and covered the outer layer of the circle in a grey eyeshadow. This is a detail I noticed a bit late, but it wasn't too hard to add. And that's the all-night mask done. Please let me know if you like how the mask turned out. Feel free to subscribe if you want to follow along with the project, and let me know in the comments which mask you want to see next. Lastly, happy 40 years to Zelda. I'm glad I'm doing this project in time for that, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!